A few weeks ago, I recorded a video here about the abrupt dismissals in Formula One history. At one point, I think it was even at the beginning of the video, I had a sudden idea, already with the camera rolling. What if we made a video about the most forgettable drivers in history? Those names that came and went, leaving behind no records, no marks, no achievements, practically nothing, except their entry on the list. They did nothing noteworthy, and that's exactly why you don't remember them. Well then, today, in true Indiana Jones style, we're going to take an archaeological dive, an investigation to talk about 10 of the most forgettable drivers in history. Very different from what we usually discuss here. Records, great stories, someone who practically made it rain. These drivers today pass through almost like a rumor, a piece of gossip. No one saw them, no one knows where they went. Today on Splash and Go, we're going to talk about the forgettable ones. Let's go! The premise is that you don't remember or have a hard time associating this name with a Formula One driver. So there's no point in suggesting to me in the comments section Andrea Cesaris, Philippe Alliot, René Arnoux, Satoru Nakajima, and so on. Because those guys we remember. So if you're thinking of those guys, you didn't get the premise of the video. Forgettable ones. And I narrowed down our search to between 1980 and 2024 last year. Why? Because before 1980, Formula One was a bit more amateur. So there were teams that raced with 3 cars, teams that raced with only 1 car, teams that would race in just one event and skip the others, and so on. And then our search universe would turn into chaos. But from 1980 onwards, things started to become more and more professional. And because of Ecclestone TV rights, the emergence of FOCA, the English Constructors Association, and so on, everything became much more organized. The super license system was created, and so forth. All right? So what about the first of them? In 1986, our friend Alan Berg appeared for a brief stint that lasted only 9 Grands Prix, all of them driving for Osella, a small team with even smaller resources. Berg, unsurprisingly, didn't score any points, a fate that was pretty common for most drivers who came in for these fleeting appearances. But the interesting thing about Alan Berg's story isn't just that he came and did almost nothing in Formula One, but rather that he later went to Mexico and had a relatively fruitful career racing in local Formula series. And more than that, he took his passion further and started teaching drivers, founding the Allenberg Racing School, a renowned driving school in Mexico. So you see, not all is lost when you're a driver who makes it to Formula One and doesn't achieve much, even if you've beaten someone named Da Silva in British Formula 3. Next stop. In 1989, someone appeared on the Formula One grid who already had a last name written in the history of the sport, Yokim Vinklehawk. It was tough to pronounce that last name, okay? He had a brother who had already raced, Manfred, whose footsteps he tried to follow, nicknamed Smoke because he was always holding a cigarette. Here in Brazil, at least in my family, people would have called him Chimney. He had a modest stint with the equally low-profile AGS team, but it was also disastrous. There were 7 attempts to get the car on the grid and 0 starts during the cruel and also entertaining era of pre-qualifying. Formula One at that time was brutal, and some teams would travel the entire season to the Grand Prix events and still couldn't get their car on the grid. Sometimes it was also because they didn't want to. I've already told the story of the pre-qualifying era in this video here. Link in the description. So 7 attempts, 0 starts, and Smoking Joe, Winkelhock's nickname, went on to race in touring cars where he actually achieved results. Winning races in the BTCC, which is the British Touring Car Championship, and in the DTM, the German Estonia. A talent who had his chance in Formula One, but doesn't have a place in your memory. But look how interesting. This last name might have stuck in your mind because his nephew, Manfred's son, his brother, showed up in Formula One in 2007 and led the race. Winkelhock, or Winkelhock as some might say with more fluency, in German, put a Spiker car, maybe you don't remember Spiker either, in first place at Nürburgring. Just so you see, here we don't hold back. Also in 1989, we have Pierre-Henri Raffanel, and his story in Formula One is yet another one that seems to have come straight out of a record book, bizarre records that is, because he attempted to qualify with cars from Larousse, Colony, and Yao on 17 occasions, managing to start in just one, a solitary race. And that race wasn't just any race, it was the 1989 Monaco Grand Prix, and he did it with a Colony car. But at least he could tell his grandchildren, Uba, the only Grand Prix where I lined up on the grid was the crown jewel of Formula One. And to show that sometimes the sport can be brutal, even to drivers with some talent, after that he had 14 entries in the 24 Hours of Le Mans and became an official test driver for Bugatti, breaking several top speed records with the Veyron model. That's quite an interesting and fast-paced career path. The early 90s saw the Formula One grid swell in size. The end of the turbo era had brought down the cost of making engines. And before all the manufacturers left what was collapsing, the Group C, the cost escalation in Formula One hadn't started yet. So many teams, several of them not really up to the task, kept going through pre-qualifying, and cars on the grid that looked more like Formula 3, Formula 3000, you name it, were the norm at the time. Just ask yourself. You probably don't even remember the name Clauddio Langis, who raced for Eurobrunn in 1990. 14 pre-qualifying sessions or even qualifying attempts, and not once did he see the green light, or back then the green light on the starting grid. But I don't blame him in this case in 1990, because Eurobrunn, as Roberto Moreno tells it, wanted to keep the money from drivers who brought their own sponsorships and not actually line up on the grid, since lining up on the grid meant expenses, tires, fuel, spare parts, mechanics, and so on. So that's why I say some teams didn't really want to race. We know that having the right last name opens doors for drivers in Formula One. And David Brabham, whom we interviewed here, managed to complete 2 full seasons in 1990 and 1994. But David, as the results show, both in Formula One, considering what he managed to do with 2 bad cars and later outside of F1, was a good driver. His brother Gary also raced. Well, raced is a bit of an exaggeration for a bad team, and outside of Formula One, he collected results that were far less impressive than his brothers. But in their case, they ended up with life, possibly the worst team in Formula One history, so bad, in fact, that Andrea Moda seems serious and well-structured by comparison. Or, for example, Lola Mastercard. Yes, I do intend to tell all these stories, but the life car with its W engine, yes, W-shaped 12 cylinders, was so bad that the car often wouldn't even start. When it did start, it wouldn't move. When it did move, it would only make it out of the garage. When it left the garage, it would break down in the pit lane. It was rare for this clunker to even complete a lap, so it's only natural that they never managed to qualify. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic, because after all, there was a driver there trying to make something happen. For Gary, there were 2 attempts, because after that he bailed and other candidates, or rather, victims, came along in the United States and Brazil, Phoenix, and Interlagos. After those experiences, he went on to try his luck with other things. He even managed to win the 12 Hours of Sebring, and also won a championship in Formula 3000, proving in some way that even if he wasn't as good as his brother, and certainly not as good as his father, at least the blame for the 1990 results wasn't exactly his. I included this one on the list because despite being a driver with achievements, I'm sure that most people who watch Formula One, without digging too deep into the details, don't remember him. Between 1987 and 1994, Yanek Delmas tried 49 times to get the car on the grid, with a low success rate. He started in 4 races, but to be fair, 4 starts, 2 points scored. At a time when only the top 6 finishers scored any points. But what makes his career particularly interesting is the impact that health had on it, because he was diagnosed with a disease. Let me read it to say it right. Legionellosis, which I looked up, is a fungus that affects air conditioning systems and settles in the lungs. And because of that, his career was interrupted. But if things didn't work out for him in Formula One, in the world of endurance racing, that's where he truly found his place. Because he won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, with 3 different manufacturers, Peugeot, Porsche, and BMW. Undoubtedly a giant in endurance racing, but I wouldn't be surprised if, for you, he's a forgotten name. The name Andrea Monttermini is undoubtedly linked to one of the darkest periods in Formula One, history, because he appeared precisely in the wake of the deaths of Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna being called up by Simtek. We've already told the story of this team in this video here, link in the description, specifically to replace the Austrian who died at Imola, taking over the car only in Barcelona. Simtek ran with just 1 car in Monaco the following race, and during free practice, Monttermini had a massive crash that took him out. He suffered serious fractures to his ankle and heel, and was sidelined for the rest of the 1994 season. But then, with extremely weak cars like Pacific and Ford Corsa, if there was any chance of achieving something, it was gone. 20 starts, 0 points. And an interesting fact, Monttermini is one of the shortest drivers in Formula One history, standing at 1 meter 57, 4 centimeters shorter than Yuki Tsunoda, who is currently the shortest driver on the grid. Takuto Inui is a driver whose name isn't remembered, but whose feat is unforgettable, because he's the driver who was run over by the medical car at Hungaroring in 1995. That's right, you probably didn't remember his name, but there's a good chance you remember what happened. He raced for Simtek in a few races in 1994 and for Footwork Aeros in 1995, largely thanks to the support of Japanese sponsors he brought with him. But as I mentioned, he became famous because of an incident, actually incidents, or plural, that happened in 1995. In Monaco, a safety car, a Renault Clio C, crashed into his stationary footwork in the middle of the track, and he miraculously escaped unscathed, but the car's chassis was cracked. Later in Hungary, his car suffers a failure. He stops in a dangerous position, gets out, goes to grab a fire extinguisher, and when he comes back to put out a fire on the car, he gets hit by the safety car, in this case, the medical car, falls down, takes a tumble. Murray Walker says some funny things on the broadcast, and so on. And if he was an unlucky guy, he knew how to handle it, because on social media everyone says his posts are really entertaining, especially with that self-deprecating humor, making fun of the things that happened to him, and the public loves it. Known by a mean nickname in the paddock, Johnny Car Wash, which is a literal translation of his name, Giovanni Lavaggi to Johnny Car Wash, or to put it another way, João Lavakaro. He often appears on lists of the worst drivers in Formula One history. And I can't say that's wrong. His time in Formula One in 1995 with Pacific Cars and in 1996 driving for Minardi was marked by a lack of competitiveness. But not only that, there were also some pretty blatant blunders. He started late in motorsport at 26 years old, while most kids usually begin in karting. He came from a noble family, which always makes things a bit easier, but it also raises suspicions that it's much more about money than talent, no? And he naturally failed to qualify for several races, with his best result being a 10th place finish. However, he does pass our test for a forgettable name, because you don't remember him. And after leaving Formula One, he decided to put what he had learned in that world to use by building cars, and he created the 𝙾𝙙𝙀. This shows that even if he had money that opened doors for him to get into Formula One, at least he genuinely liked this business. The 2000s brought the first Malaysian driver, therefore Malay, to Formula One, and he raced alongside a Brazilian at Minardi. Tarso Marques and Alex Yoong were the team's duo, which was no longer owned by Giancarlo, having been sold to Paul Stoddart. He had financial backing from Malaysia, which in this case was putting money into Sauber through Petronas. And the plan, naturally, was to develop him away from the spotlight at Minardi, where there was no pressure, so that maybe he could become something at a bigger team. But the plans were somewhat optimistic, because he could hardly ever get past the 107% 1% barrier. And when he did manage to, it was always at the very back of the grid. In the second season, now paired with Mark Webber, he got thoroughly outperformed and was even replaced a few times by the Englishman Anthony Davidson, who was also rather forgettable, but later became more well-known as a commentator for F1 TV. At the end of the 2002 season, we would never hear about Alex Yoong again, who later expressed regret, saying that his not-so-happy stint in Formula One hurt the development of motorsport in Malaysia. Because you know how it is, right? There must have been some local version of Caseta e Planeta too, making fun of him and so on. And then it became much harder for other drivers to get sponsorship. Because after all, when someone becomes a laughingstock, you know how it goes. This list could be much longer and we could stay here talking about many more, but we have enough material to make a whole series. Because off the top of my head, I think of Max Chilton, Roberto Merhi, Zsolt Baumgartner, remember him? Giorgio, Pantano, Nicolas Chiesa, Scott Speed. Anyway, it's a whole batch. Let's stick with 10. We'll bring more later, and I invite you to mention some forgettable name here that only you remembered, but everyone else will say, oh my god, how did I forget about this guy? Challenge issued. The comment section is yours, and that even helps boost engagement. Don't want to mention a driver's name? Tell us where you're watching from, drop a little emoji, whatever you like. And of course, leave a like. It's free, it doesn't cost anything, it really helps the channel. Do me this favor, do us this favor, and don't forget to leave your hype. I've asked for all these things, and I'm going to ask for one more. We're competing for the iBest Award in the Automotive and Transport Influencer category, and we're doing great. I'll leave the link in the description so you can vote for us. We started out at 240, made it into the top 50, then into the top 20. As of the day we're recording this video, we're in 9th place. We've made it through the first 20, kind of like Q1, Q2, Q3. Let's see if we can make it to the finals. With your support, which gives us an incredible amount of engagement, we've already climbed up, so it's very likely that we can go far, all right? So, to make sure you don't miss anything we do here, we have notification channels, Instagram, Telegram, and WhatsApp, in addition to our other social media. So here are our handles, where there's content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok. Deal? That's it. Thanks. And a big hug.